Hey folks, this is Tron Games and welcome to Total War Warhammer 3. Today we're doing another getting started guide for Lord Mazdamundi. This is a Hexawaddle faction, which was one of the Lizardmen factions. So, um, faction effects for the Lizardmen, there is actually a really powerful hero that you can unlock. This guy's really good if you can get towards him. It's a really good thing. Lizardmen have a kind of faction effect called the Geomantic Web, which basically allows you to kind of boost the power of commandments. You can see kind of a map of that if you click this button. Right now, I mean, we only have the single settlement, but as you expand, you can see different options show up here, and there is actually there are actually buildings in this section which reinforce the geomantic web. So you often do build these buildings later in the campaign because they just increase your income, but off the bat, you tend to leave them alone. Now, there's also this function called blessed spawnings. So we have a few options here for rights. The Rite of Primeval Glory can be extremely good. It does cost quite a bit of money, and you can only use it so very often. But it does spawn a pretty strong army, especially early in the campaign. The one thing that you have to be aware of when you do summon a Rite of Primeval Glory army is that you have to pay for it. So it will affect your upkeep. If I recall correctly, if you do this in the first little while, the army spawns and it takes, a few thousand, maybe 2 or 3 thousand upkeep per turn to keep up. So just be very aware of that. If you do use the Rite of Primeval Glory early, is that it's very expensive. And you have different other ones. This is quite a good one early on. It buffs your skink units. Um, Again, there's a few other ones here that are pretty good too for just earning some additional money, and then you can get a Slan Mage Priest with the final one. Now, this campaign, Lord Mazdamundi's campaign, used to be quite a bit easier. Total War Warhammer 3 has made it quite a bit more difficult. And honestly, he actually has quite a difficult start in this campaign. And so one of the reasons he has a little bit difficult start is that he's at war with two factions. You're at war with Skegi, which is over here, and then you're at war with the Keepers of Bliss, which is a Slaanesh faction. Skegi is a Norscan faction, so they actually cause corruption, so you suffer attrition when you're in their areas. And the major problem, though, is actually the Keepers of Bliss. The Keepers of Bliss are quite a bit stronger than you are to start with. Um, and like Slaanesh just starts with some really nasty units. So what we do here usually at the beginning is you should fight a lot of these battles manually. I mean, you get a Pyrrhic victory right at the beginning in this fight. And they don't actually have any of their really bad units in this army, honestly. You'll see them in a couple of turns. So we'll auto-resolve that, and while you can take, money or whatever, I just about always take replenishment on the first turn. And then if you actually continue along here, if you fight it manually, you probably win. If you try to auto-resolve it, you may actually lose that battle. And so I'm actually going to take it a little bit slow and come back and get some other units. I typically tend to go with these guys off the bat. Honestly, the units that you have available for the Lizardmen at the beginning of the campaign they're just bad. Most of them are pretty terrible units. So be very aware of that. You particularly they auto resolve really poorly, so just keep that in mind as you're going. You may find yourself wanting to fight a lot of battles manually at the beginning of the campaign. Now, one thing we'll look at here before we talk about buildings is there's actually no tech tree for them off the bat. You actually have to build specific buildings to unlock different things. So in terms of this area, we really don't want to risk losing this area. So one of the buildings that we tend to want to build is this one, because we want to grow this and we want to unlock the Tablet of Spawning. Then we'll go take just a few looks at some of the other buildings. So we can't do anything until we get to level 3, with regards to protecting it. Building this is actually really strong in the settlement um, early in the early game, because just allows you to protect this zone that much more. Now, I almost always build the gold mining pit. It's only cost 500 and it generates 300 per turn. It's quite a strong initial building to create. And then you have um, this building here is often another one that I create just so I can unlock the tablet of crafts on the next turn. So that's typically what I tend to start with. You don't have kind of any ability to recruit anything off the bat. And what we're going to do here is we can't really recruit anything to start with. We're not going to do any more attacking this turn. So I'm actually going to advance a turn as we start to talk about a few other things. Now, one of the major buffs, I guess, that this faction has is that Lord Mazdamundi, once you get him leveled up, is quite a decent lord, actually. He's got pretty good spells. He gets increased winds of magic. His lower upkeep for temple guards, even though later in the campaign you probably won't recruit that many of them. His army gets experience every turn. Has I think it's less chance to miscast as well. So he's quite a he's quite a decent lord once you get him leveled up. The main thing that we want to focus on at the beginning is securing this province, which means taking Fallen Gates, and it means taking Massive Peaks. So we're going to come back here, we're going to take this settlement, and again, another Pyrrhic victory, even after we recruited 2 units. If you fight this battle manually, you won't lose these. I'm going to do this just to keep the video going, but we'll actually loot and occupy this settlement just for the replenishment, because like I said, we want to keep, like, this unit's almost died in just that short time. So very good to kind of take these areas. Now, actually, it's usually pretty common for this section here to have a barracks built. You can recruit red crested skinks there. I often will just come over here and build the growth building if that isn't built yet. Now, we've got kind of our army started, and we're going to try to buff the ambush success chance of Lord Mazdamundi, and there's a very specific reason for that. If we come down here, and we actually unlocked one of the rights there right away. If we come down here, this army is, honestly, it can be a nightmare. This is an army that Slaanesh puts some of its daemonettes in, and the daemonettes just absolutely shred your troops. It doesn't matter what you have, they shred everything. They're faster. They're just overall better units in the early game. So really be very aware of your position with them. Your best bet is to try to ambush them. If you're able to do that, you can knock out a really dangerous faction in the early game. So just keep that in mind. We don't want to lose this unit because it's one of our only large units kind of remaining. So we're going to take a few turns just to kind of build ourselves up. This campaign is a very slow start, but it's purely slow because the units you have kind of suck. And there are just quite a few dangerous factions close to you. There's this Sharktooth faction, which is an ogre faction that's right there. There's also the Marathis faction, the Cult of Pleasure, just a little ways to the north here, and they usually beat the crap out of these guys. So coming after these guys can be not a terrible idea as you try to build your strength up, but honestly, like, you're gonna have your hands full with these guys. These guys are just so much better than you to start with that you're potentially going to have trouble with them. I almost always try to ambush them at the beginning, because if you can take this settlement, not only do you secure your initial province, but there's actually a really good building in this settlement where you can reduce the construction cost of different buildings in your entire province. So getting this settlement is a high priority. You want to try to shoot for that. Now in terms of victory conditions, the short victory conditions are very simple. Kill Keepers of Bliss and kill Skaggy. I mean, in terms of conquering areas, you don't have to go super far to knock out your short campaign victory. You're trying to take this little region here. Now, one of the things with this faction is that your climates are kind of jungle, desert, and savanna, and most of these other areas are kind of unpleasant, and anywhere that's frozen, wasteland, ocean is like uninhabitable. And you can see that once you get up this direction, it starts to get uninhabitable. So you don't tend to want to work your way north very much. Like if I pick a fight with this faction, I just usually raise their settlements, and I'm focused on actually expanding to the south because this is where, you know, suitable climates for us to build settlements are. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. The lizardmen would be cold-blooded. They don't want to live in the cold areas, so it makes sense that they would do that there. Now we could repair this building. I'm not going to, because I want the money. We'll just go ahead one more turn here. Now, in terms of this faction's starting position overall, the Slaanesh faction is by far the worst enemy in this area. Everything that you do should be focused around getting rid of them as early as possible. That might mean recruiting an extra lord. It might mean, you know, running your faction basically ragged on money or even losing money just so you can get rid of them right away. We're going to come down back to Hexalotl here, and we're going to train a few more troops. Very slow, like I said, very slow start to this campaign. And you can see I'm just stacking, you know, this is kind of the best unit we have to start with in terms of weapons. Defense against large foes. This army usually has some large foes, but these are the units that I'm talking about right here. These daemonettes. They start with significantly higher melee attack and melee defense, and it's magical damage. They're also armor piercing, so like all of these wonderful units that we have that have, you know, pretty significant amounts of armor, they don't stand up very well in the face of those units. So it's important to get your army built up as quickly as you can. Now the one thing that you can unlock is blessed spawnings, and you want to hopefully get those as quickly as you can, but you don't typically get those opportunities right away. We'll just touch on one last thing here. So for Lord Mazdamundi, this is one of the things I was talking about. He has like pretty ridiculous targeting range for spells, so he can cast spells a long ways. He also has increased unit experience, more winds of magic, and decreased upkeep. But one of the things that's nice is that he starts with pretty high missile resistance because he's really slow. This lord is like, he's quite slow to start with. Once he gets this mount, he's quite a bit better, but you can see that's not till rank 18. So you have to be really careful in the early game here that you don't get wiped out early on. So with that, that's about all I've got for this one. If you like the content, feel free to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel for more in the future. Thanks for watching.